For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh. Revi. On the talking point today, we're looking at 1 year since the Taliban seized power in Afghanistan with Bill Roggio. Good to see you again, Bill. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. It's great to see you, and thanks for having me back on.
1 year of Taliban rule, Bill, and 2 weeks before that, we saw what happened before the August 15th anniversary with President Biden announcing the killing of Ayman al-Zawahiri. What does that say to you? I mean, you've been very vociferous both in your writings and in online about the Taliban declarations of no group or individual being allowed to operate against the third country from Afghanistan.
Yeah, this was all it wasn't that the evidence was all the evidence we needed. We've seen indications there's other global terrorist organizations operating from within Afghanistan. Over the last several months, the head of the Turkestan Islamic Party, a key leader of a group named Ansarullah, which is a Tajik terrorist group, is operating in Afghanistan. Zawahiri was really the cherry on top. We all knew what was happening in Afghanistan. Look, the Biden administration, part of their justification for leaving Afghanistan was saying that al-Qaeda was, quote, done, that al-Qaeda was no longer present in Afghanistan. Less than 1 year later, we killed the top leader of al-Qaeda, not just in some cave in Afghanistan or in the southern deserts or something like that. He was in a posh guest house run by Sirajuddin Haqqani, the head of the Taliban's interior ministry. Oh, and also he's one of two deputy leaders of the Taliban, two deputy emirs. Zawahiri doesn't travel. He wasn't just on vacation, taking a brief visit to Kabul to rest. He was in Afghanistan, in Kabul, in order to conduct consultations with the Taliban. How do we know this? 2 weeks prior to his death, the United Nations issued a report stating that top al-Qaeda leaders were consulting with top Taliban leaders, providing strategic advice. Then we find Zawahiri is in Kabul. I think we could put 2 and 2 together and get 4 on this one. This is a worry. He wasn't in Afghanistan alone. He comes with a staff, and we all know that the staff is important for al-Qaeda's operations. We found this in bin Laden's documents. This is an absolute disaster for U.S. policymakers who thought that leaving Afghanistan would end this so-called endless war. All it's done is extended it. It's given the Taliban 100% control of Afghanistan, and given al-Qaeda complete safe haven.
Zabiullah Mujahid, the Emirates spokesperson, issued a statement denying any knowledge of Zawahiri's presence in Kabul. What do you read of that? They say investigations are still on.
Yeah, that's laughable. This is a standard Taliban lie. They've claimed, look, before 9/11, the Taliban claimed that Osama bin Laden would not be a problem to the United States, that they would keep him under control. He wasn't a threat. And then we get 9/11. Post 9/11, the Taliban claims all of the foreigners left the country because of the U.S. invasion, and they're not based there anymore. And U.S. killed numerous top al-Qaeda leaders in Afghanistan, even while the U.S. was present in Afghanistan, even including members of its top shura, members of military committees that were plotting attacks against the West. So they lied before 9/11, they lied after 9/11, and now that Zawahiri's killed in Kabul, they're lying about whether he was even there. This is exactly what I expect from the Taliban. It is not shocking. They lied to the United States during the negotiations, which should have been easy to sniff out, but the U.S. was so desperate to leave under both the Trump and Biden administrations that they accepted it. Nothing that the Taliban, how do you know a Taliban spokesman is lying? It's when his lips are moving.
To your mind, what is the strikes say about American CT operations or over-the-horizon strikes?
What we demonstrated here, the United States demonstrated here, is that it can indeed reach into Afghanistan and conduct a strike and kill a senior leader. I'll be impressed if they can do this, sustain a campaign like this over time, much like the U.S. did in Pakistan, northwestern Pakistan, from 2005 to about 2017, 18. 1 year since withdrawal, one senior leader of al-Qaeda is killed. We know that there's numerous al-Qaeda leaders and dangerous operatives that are inside of Afghanistan. It took the U.S. almost 6 months to plan and execute this strike. If the U.S. targets al-Qaeda, top al-Qaeda leadership, and kills them at a rate of 1 per year, that is certainly a operational tempo that al-Qaeda can sustain. Let's keep in mind, Zawahiri has been on the run since 9/11, right? Even before then, because he was wanted for his role in the U.S. Embassy, al-Qaeda's attacks on the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998. I challenge people to name a single member of the U.S. government or military senior who was present in government on 9/11. Like name a president, a vice president, a cabinet member, or a top U.S. general, senior general, who was operating in U.S. government at the time of 9/11. And the answer to that question is zero. But Zawahiri evaded U.S. efforts to hunt him down for almost 21 years. He outlasted every administration official from the Bush administration, as well as the generals. The al-Qaeda leaders don't retire and get a cushy job at some think tank or get to be a chairman of a board or a member of a prestigious board of a company. They either die of old age or they die in counterterrorism operations, and that's how Zawahiri went out. And he had 11 years to lead al-Qaeda and 21 years post 9/11 to evade the U.S. So we need to put that in perspective when understanding how long it took to kill him.
And what do you think about the conspiracy theories that are doing the rounds on who gave up information about him, whether it's Pakistan who needed the IMF money, whether it was Sirajuddin himself who wants to get off the sanctions list, or a faction of the Taliban that is against Sirajuddin? I mean, there was so many things there. Considering, I presume, on the ground intelligence, the Americans probably didn't really have, or at least didn't have in comparison to a year back.
Yeah, I think these are all conspiracy theories. The Pakistanis particularly wouldn't want to expose their proxy, the Taliban, particularly Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is, in their pocket. They wouldn't want to expose him to embarrassment like this. So you can rule out the Pakistanis. I constantly hear stories of factionalized and divided Taliban. The Taliban was so fragmented and factionalized and divided that it took control of the country and has held control of it for 1 year. I would challenge, so someone needs to name me that Taliban faction that's against Sirajuddin Haqqani, who would have the guts in case if this was exposed, right? Sirajuddin Haqqani is about as ruthless a killer as you have, and that speaks volumes in the Afghan-Pakistan region. Sirajuddin Haqqani would react, dare I say, quite violently to even rumors that someone sold him out for Zawahiri's presence. And I think the members of the Taliban, even if they didn't like Sirajuddin Haqqani, were quite aware of his capabilities. Keep in mind, he's the head of the Interior Ministry as well. So not only does he have the power of his powerful Haqqani network behind him, but the power of the Afghan state and the Interior Ministry. So these are fanciful rumors. Look, we heard the same thing after bin Laden was killed in Abbottabad. The Pakistanis helped us and this and that. I use Occam's razor on this. The simplest explanation is the most likely.
You mentioned the UN monitoring report that came out in May, the first since the Taliban seized power again. And like you said, there are other terrorist groups that were mentioned there, in particular of great concern to India, like the Jaish-e-Mohammed or the Lashkar-e-Taiba. And there was specific areas that were mentioned in Kunar, in Nangarhar, where the Taliban was still involved in training them. Or so it's not just Al-Qaeda or the ETM.
Absolutely correct. Yes. And, look, groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, they've lowered their profile over the last several years. Part of the reason is they played a behind-the-scenes role in helping the Taliban take control of Afghanistan. So we've heard a lot less about them over the years, but that doesn't mean they're no longer a threat to India. I documented U.S. I'm going to say it was back to 2015 when the State Department was when they designated the Harkat al-Mujahideen, which is another virulent terrorist group that wants to attack inside of India. The U.S. State Department said they were running training camps. Every year I've followed up and said, are they still running training camps there in Afghanistan? And the answer has always been yes. This is, we cannot, Afghanistan, this is the problem of a Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. Before this was happening, even with the U.S. presence and with an Afghan government and military that was attempting to keep these groups on their back feet, there is no such restraint against these groups anymore. They can operate with impunity. The Taliban owes them. They owe them a blood debt. These groups played a key role in the Taliban takeover, and they're being rewarded now, even as the Taliban lies to us about their presence.
I mentioned Zabiullah Mujahideen's statement a couple of weeks ago, and maybe a day before President Biden announced al-Zawahiri's death in that airstrike. I spoke to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson, Abdul Balkhi, and I asked him the specific question about the LeT and JeM. I just want you to listen to that, and then I want to ask you another question about India.
Sure.
Directly denying, say, for example, links to groups that have in the past attacked India, like the JEM and the LET?
Absolutely. The government of Afghanistan has a policy of non-interference, and it has made a commitment to the world. And we announced this in the Tashkent conference as well, that no group or individual will be allowed to use the territory of Afghanistan against any other country.
That's what he said, Bill. Now, India has formally begun engaging, probably the last major regional power to do so, with the Taliban. We've opened our diplomatic mission again, maybe at a junior level. We call it a technical team. And I've heard that the Indian government has been, quote unquote, reassured by the top leadership, which I would again presume would include Sirajuddin Haqqani, that the Taliban will not allow any individuals or group to use Afghanistan soil against India. What would you advise the Indian government?
Yeah, as I noted before, these are the lies that have been told for 4 decades now by the Taliban. You should not trust the Taliban in any way, shape, or form. The Indian government is making a big mistake by engaging the Taliban in any way, shape, or form. They can't be trusted. The Taliban is very good at lulling those who want assurances that they aren't the monsters that they are. The Indian government should be taking the exact opposite tact. Because look, the reality is no matter how the Indian government engages the Taliban, it won't change their behavior. They will continue to shelter and support Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Harkat al-Mujahideen, and on and on and on. All of the alphabet soup of Pakistani terror groups. Pakistan is in a great place right now. They don't have to host these camps. They don't have to take the risk of the Indian intelligence in detecting these camps. They could get all of it moved inside of Afghanistan, where it's far more difficult for the Indian intelligence to detect them. What the Indian government should do is end all contacts with the Taliban. It is detrimental to continue these contacts and start supporting the massive Afghan resistance groups like the National Resistance Front. If you want to gather intelligence on what the Taliban's doing and where they're doing it, this is your best bet. Talking with the Taliban. This is how the U.S. lulled itself into a false sense of security with the Doha agreements and years prior with the Obama administration talks Remember, they released the Taliban 5 in exchange for Bo Bergdahl. These were nasty individuals, mass murderers. All of them had ties to al-Qaeda. The Taliban is very, very good at extracting concessions while giving up absolutely none. And the Indian government shouldn't play this game in any way, shape, or form.
The argument that is given is that security concerns are so deep for India in that region that there's nothing much you can do sitting here in Delhi. So engagement is necessary. Doesn't mean you're condoning what the Taliban are doing, doesn't mean you're recognizing them.
Well, to engagement to what ends? Like, what is the point of engaging the Taliban? The only point would be to get them to make concessions, to change their behavior in some way. But we all know the Taliban will say one thing and then do exactly what it wants and do it exactly what it's done, which is support, harbor, shelter, and allow these groups to survive and thrive. That's what the Taliban has done since the 1990s. So I'm not certain what engagement with the Taliban gives the Indian government other than granting a legitimacy to a terrorist organization.
So how would you react to how, well, I guess it's not official, but the Wall Street Journal's report saying that the Biden administration is now, not going to give up that $7 billion in foreign assets that held the Afghan central bank funds, and has also suspended talks with the Taliban.
I think it's probably one of the few things the Biden administration has done in Afghanistan, if not the only thing that it's done that I can agree with. You will not be able to get aid to the Afghan people. I am sympathetic to the Afghan people. They're starving. They don't have medicine. But providing aid to them would require giving cash to the Taliban. There is no way that anyone here in the United States, U.S. taxpayer dollar, could provide money to a group that openly shelters the Taliban. Openly shelters al-Qaeda. It just can't be done. And unfortunately, look, my view is there was a lot of countries that wanted the Taliban to win and wanted the U.S. out of Afghanistan. Those countries would be Pakistan, Iran, China, and Russia, primarily. Let them provide aid. Let them provide billions of their country's hard-earned dollars to the Taliban so they can support their people. Money is fungible. If you provide money to the Taliban to support the people of Afghanistan, it is directly propping up the Taliban regime. The Taliban regime itself, which is responsible for Afghan people starving, for repressing Afghan people. So for once, I can agree with the Biden administration on policy, assuming that report is true.
Yeah. Bill Roggio, as usual, really appreciate your time. Thank you for appearing on StratNews Global again.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to join you, and have a great day.
Same to you. And to all our viewers, if you want to get the latest that we put up on our website or YouTube channel, join our Telegram channel. You can see the scroll at the bottom of your screen. If you'd like to support us financially, also there's the UPI QR code that's flashing on your screen. Currently, the link is in the YouTube descriptor as well. This is The Talking Point on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi.